become in the world, and how I, in my own work, in my own company, seek out multilingual people all the time. And in fact, they are some of the higher paid people in my company because of how valuable they are. And I'll give you guys an example. On the example I gave Nancy when she heard me speak the first time. And this was back in, this was a few years ago, back in the late 1990s. And I was working with the Prime Minister of Israel. And we had found out that the Chinese were about to sell a very dangerous weapon to the Iranian government. And Israel didn't want the Iranians to have that weapon. And we tried diplomatically to get them to not make the sale, but couldn't achieve it. And so the Prime Minister decided he would fly to China and speak with the President of China one-on-one. And the whole state visit was scheduled, which takes a lot of work, and 3 or 4 days of meetings were scheduled to try and convince the Chinese President not to make the sale. Well, as we get off the plane, the Chinese President meets the Prime Minister at the bottom of the stairs. The Prime Minister has his interpreter, whose native language is Hebrew, but who speaks Chinese, but not great Chinese. And the Chinese President has his interpreter, who speaks fluent Chinese, obviously, and happens to speak very, very fluent Hebrew. A much better translator than our own translator. And as the two leaders shook hands, the President of China, Zheng Xiaomin, says to the Prime Minister, I just want you to know I really respect the Jewish people. And the Prime Minister was taken aback for a second. Well, I really respect the Chinese people. The President of China said, yes, the Jewish civilization and the Chinese civilization, two of the oldest civilizations on the face of the earth. And the Prime Minister nodded and said, yes, I'd also include the people of India, another 4,500 civilization. And the President of China agreed. And then the Prime Minister says, well, let me ask you a question, Mr. President. How many Chinese are there in China? The President says, oh, about 1 billion. He says, how many Indians are there in India? President Zheng Xiaomin says, about 900 million. Prime Minister Netanyahu says, well, do you know how many Jews there are in the entire world? And Zheng Xiaomin thinks for a moment, says, no, how many? He says, there are 13.5 million. And the next words out of the President's mouth were, what happened? And the Prime Minister says, well, a lot of things happened. You, the Chinese, but one main thing happened. You, the Chinese, always had China for 5,000 years. Indians always had India for 4,000 years, but the Jews were kicked out of their homeland 4,000 years ago. And it took 2,000 years to try and rebuild that civilization. The President is nodding his head. And understand this is all happening in real time with a translator. And our translator, the Israeli translator, is absolutely silent. He's become completely useless. But the Chinese translator, who actually spoke a very high level of Hebrew, is translating in real time. And this conversation is happening literally on the tarmac in front of the airplane, even before the review of the honor guard, which is when the Prime Minister walks in front of the army, the Chinese army. And the conversation goes on for about 10 minutes this way. And it was a great conversation. And spent 3 days in China. And a few months later, it was learned that the Chinese, at the request of the Chinese president, the sale of this weapon was canceled to the Iranians. And I've always said that, in my opinion, had that Chinese translator not had the level of multilingualism that he had, that conversation would not have happened that way, and the whole success of the trip may not have been fulfilled if it wasn't for that one translator. I can tell you, I just got back 2 days ago from Serbia. We have an election for president there. My job is I organize and manage and run campaigns for presidents and prime ministers in countries around the world. I do it in Europe. I do it in Asia. I do it in Africa and South America. And the most important people that I work with, both from my team and the other team, are the people who do the interpreting, meaning when I'm talking to someone who doesn't speak English and vice versa, we have someone who interprets. People who know how to copyright, so I write a speech or I write a TV ad or I write a Facebook ad or a tweet, and we need to put it into the local language. And I'll need someone who knows copywriting in a foreign language, who also knows English very well, so they know what I'm trying to convey. These people end up becoming the most valuable people in my line of work. And I will tell you that I see it all around the world, not just in my line of work, but in business and in law. The need for people who not only are proficient in more than one language, but who really have either a foreign mother tongue that's not English, or English is their mother tongue, but a really strong second language because either their parents or their family these are jobs that I think are a fantastic career path. They pay very well. I think they enable people the opportunity to go well beyond their communities and travel and see the world and really expand their own horizons. It is really, I think all of you are in a very unique position. I was lucky enough, I got my first job internationally and working for a former head of state because I spoke a second language. It was the only reason I got hired. It wasn't because I was the smartest. It wasn't because I had the best grades. It wasn't because I had the best resume. It was only because I spoke a second language. And it was for that reason alone I got my first job and ended up having, for me, what has been an amazing career. But it was just because I could read a newspaper in a foreign language, I could watch TV in a foreign language, and I could communicate in a foreign language that I got that job. And I think all of you are in a unique position in that you're taking second language very seriously. You have great teachers from the ones I met a few months ago in Hamilton County. And I think you are all setting yourselves up to, if you want, to have a career that really is going to be different than most regular careers. Again, and it could go any way. You may want to be a lawyer, but the fact that you speak a second language will allow you to do mergers and acquisitions and legal contracts, for another country and for businesses from another country. You want to be a doctor. There is such a shortage of multilingual doctors in this country that I see that is going to be a really unique selling point for people coming out of medical school. If I remember the statistic right, there are, I think, only 900 interpreters in the medical, in hospitals in California for over 3 million non-speaking English people. I mean, it's incredible. So, again, I'm not saying that that being an interpreter necessarily is the focus of having a multilingual skills. I think there are so many current careers, but given the fact that you will have a second language, will open all kinds of doors for you. So I just wanted to, share with you my thoughts on it. I think, like I said, you guys are doing the right thing. I think you'll be an asset to wherever you go in your careers, and the people who want to hire people that have something that they can add to a company, whatever that field of work is. So I just encourage you to keep it up. And as hard as second languages are, immerse yourself in those languages, become proficient in those languages, speak them as much as you can. I encourage you to, I don't know what program the school has, but whether it's finding friends on Facebook or in a country where you're learning that language and chat with those people on Skype, whatever, in that foreign language, anything you can do to immerse yourself and make yourself more and more proficient, I believe will allow you, when you go out into the job market, to actually be paid a higher wage for having that skill than if you didn't have that skill. So I know we don't have a lot of time because I was running a little late with the technical difficulties. So Nancy, do you think it's a good idea to just maybe have some questions and answers from students?
I think it'd be wonderful. So
okay.
Go ahead, ask it. Speak into the mic so you can hear.
How many languages can you speak, and what are those?
So I speak fluently. I speak Hebrew as a second language, which is, I grew up starting from kindergarten in a multilingual school. So that is almost really a second language. My father was from France and my mother was from Germany, so I speak some French and some German. And along the way, I picked up pieces of other languages. And you will find, as I'm sure some of you already have, that once you've trained your brain to think in another language, it becomes much easier to learn other languages, especially because English is one of those rare languages, unlike most languages in the world, where you don't have the verb conjugation, the past and present, and the female and the male, and all those rules that so many languages in the world have that we speaking English don't have. And so just being able to growing up, Hebrew is one of those languages that has that. So once I had that, plus with a father that was French and a mother that was German, it made learning other languages at least to the point where I could get around. I could talk to people. I could converse with people, whether it's an Italian or another language, was made much easier. But those are languages I speak. And like I said, once you've trained your brain to think, and I remember the first time I dreamt in a foreign language, and then I knew, now I know. Now I've really become really good in the language because I'm dreaming in this language. Once you've just trained your brain to think and speak another language, it will open up many other languages for you as you go around.
All right, who else has a question? Go ahead. Let's get up so you can hear.
How often do you get to see your family?
Well, not enough. I have 3 young children, ages 10, 7, and 4, and I don't see them enough. It's something that it's a difficult thing. My career started before I got married, and once you pick such a unique career path, it's kind of hard to do other things. And although I am trying to hire more and more people who speak other languages so I can travel less. So it's an encouragement for all of you as you get a little older. Maybe you can come work for me and let me stay home more.
There you go. Go ahead. Just make sure you come up and speak.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. So not too far from you guys.
All right. Come on in. We're having to climb over. We're coming. Come in.
Oh yeah. What's your favorite place that you visit?
My favorite place that I visit. That is a really good question. I feel really lucky because I get to do a lot of things and see different things that really enrich me as a human being. I mean, my favorite place, I ended up living there for 12 years, was Israel. Spiritually, it's an amazing place. Historically, it's an amazing place. But, then I get to go to places like Kosovo or Albania or Zambia or South Africa or Colombia, South America. And you just start seeing, you get to understand the richness of people's culture, but you also get to learn an appreciation for the things that we have and most people in the world don't have. I always say that there are some words that, while they seem normal to us, so many people in the world have no sense of what it means. I'll give you an example of a word. Vacation, promotion, retirement. Those are words that people around the world, 90%, have no understanding what those words mean. And so while many of the places I visited were really wonderful, whether it was in terms of architecture or natural beauty or history, the thing that I value the most is learning not only to see the other cultures, but appreciate what we actually have and what we grew up with, and the opportunities we're afforded just through, by virtue of being in the United States.
Just coming up. Let him through.
Can you teach us some Hebrew?
What do you want me to teach you? You pick the phrase you want me to teach you.
Sam, quit singing.
No. How do you say hi? How are you?
So you would say, shalom is hello. And there are 2 different ways to say it, but let's do ma nishma, which means it basically means how's it going, because how are you, you'd have to translate depending if you're talking to a female or a male, an individual or a group. So shalom ma nishma is more generic. It means hello, how's it going?
All right, let's try it. Shalom.
I answer beseder gamor, which means I'm doing great.
Okay.
How long have you had this job?
So, I actually, it's very funny. I graduated with a degree in astrophysics because I wanted to be an astronaut. At the time, I was dating a girl who moved to Washington, D.C., and followed her to spend a summer there, and met a congressman and started working in politics. So, I guess you could say in politics I've met a lot of space cadets, but I never made it into space. I started working in 1992 in the business. In other words, I started doing political campaigns in 1992. In 1996, I did American political campaigns. In 1996 is when I was asked to go work for the campaign of Benjamin Netanyahu before he became prime minister. Again, I was asked because the company I was working for, they needed someone who spoke Hebrew, and I was the only one in the company that spoke the language and could read it. Again, it's really the reason I got that job, and we got the Prime Minister elected. I ended up becoming his chief of staff, and after I resigned from being his chief of staff, I started my own company, and that was in 2000. So I've had my company now for 17 years.
Whoever would like to speak, just come
Maybe
on
try
up.
to say it from right there. Try to ask your question from right there.
What do you like to do at your job?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
What do you like to do outside of your job?
Outside of my job,
Yes.
so I collect 1960s American muscle cars. So I love to work on them, fix the motors, and then drive them as fast as I can down the highway without getting speeding tickets.
That is awesome.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Lead.
Where is your next big event?
So right now, like I said, we have an election on April 2nd for the president of Serbia, and the next three big places that I'm working would be a presidential election in Colombia, South America, a prime minister's race in Kazakhstan, and a president's race in Ukraine.
Okay, Lacey?
Where all have you been in America?
Where have I been in the United States?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think I've been to about 42 of the 50 states. I haven't been, the only places I really haven't been are Alaska and Hawaii, and then I think some of like the Dakotas and that area, but I think I've been to 42 or 43 of the states. Some was it for work, some of it was for fun, and I will tell you that as amazing as traveling around the world is, the United States has some of the most amazing places in the world to see.
Okay, so that's okay. Right.
How important is it to have social skills in your job?
It is extremely important, and not only is it important to have social skills, it's certainly important to have the social skills that are learned from either growing up in a family where either your parents or your grandparents may have come from another country, and understanding that what may be culturally acceptable or socially acceptable, in Hamilton County, isn't necessarily acceptable in Belgrade, Serbia. And one of the things that I hear all the time when I go anywhere overseas is that, well, things are different here than in the United States. So what works in the United States won't work here. And what I found is it's very funny because I hear the same thing in the U.S. I may do a congressional race in New York and go to Florida, and they'll say in Florida, well, what works in New York doesn't work in Florida. And the fact of the matter is people generally are motivated by the same things. They're motivated by hope for a better tomorrow, a better job, a better education, better future for their children, whatever it may be. So, but having those social skills to be able to relate with people, my job in particular is all about relating with people. I have to go into a foreign country. I have to convince the local people that I'm not there to take their jobs away from them and not try to replace them, but I'm there to help and build relationships very quickly, because oftentimes I have maybe 4 or 5 months before an election, from the time I'm hired to an election, and building those relationships of trust with the local campaign teams is very, very important. It's critical to the success, both mine and theirs. So having those social skills is extremely important.
Okay, last question. You have to be close.
Have you wanted to be a politician since you were a kid?
No. So I still don't want to be a politician. I like helping politicians. I don't like being a politician. I would not want to ever have that kind of public profile for myself or my family. And I mentioned a little while ago that really when I grew up, I wanted to be an astronaut. And so I studied astrophysics in college. In fact, I've never taken a political science class in my life. What I do is one of those, I think, rare jobs that really requires experience. It's really more learning how to do it and learning it by doing it. It's not something that you can really teach in a textbook. So no, this wasn't my choice of career paths. I kind of fell into it, but I've loved every minute of it and can't imagine doing anything else.